Firstly, for those who have not been here before, welcome to the Tech Hub. For those who know the Tech Hub, well, welcome too. And for those of you who aren't so aware of the Tech Hub, if you look on your chair or the chairs in front of you, you'll find some information. So I'd encourage you to take that away. And I notice highlighted, it's only £90 plus VAT a year, which I think we all think is fantastic value. I'm really delighted tonight to have here in the room, well, more than 4 people, but I'm going to mention 4 specific people, who have an enormous amount of knowledge about raising money, running companies, and all the challenges that poses to people starting a company, already wanting to expand their company, or thinking about running a company. So I'm going to start by introducing Nona Hunter, who's from the Arts Council, who is the relationship manager in creative media. I know Nona won't mind me saying this, I found it very amusing over the last few years as the Arts Council have tried to wrap their collective brain about what digital means. And I think it's been defined and redefined on several occasions. So welcome, Nona.
Thank you.
And then on the other wing, as it were, Anne Dawson, who's founder of the business growth agency Southern Entrepreneurs, and she's the business support manager here at Eastleigh Borough Council. So I think 2 really good things that Anne can talk about business in the region. She can talk about business most specifically here in the Eastleigh area and the challenges and opportunities that go with that. Sarah Thurtle, there you are, reading it. I mean, that's the thing about digital people. They're looking at their phones all the time.
Tweeting, promoting.
Sarah is head of business lending. I always like the idea of someone who's head of business lending. You always want to talk to them at Creative United. And they advise on finance for the creative industries. And Sarah's really expert in these areas. And I'm coming to Chris last because he's the male, and I think, I'm old-fashioned and I like to talk about the ladies first. Chris is founder of Minnovation, which is a research and consultancy firm, and he's the author of Crowdfunding Intelligence. And well, we'll talk about this later. I have mixed views about crowdfunding, but I know it's here to stay, but nevertheless, it's another source of funding. And I know all of you probably here are interested in the variety of funding sources there are around. I am the executive director of The Point, which is over the road there. And my background isn't really in theatre. My background's in film and television production. And I'm so old that I can, I think, find a parallel to the situation many of you are in. I started my career in television in 1974 with Granada Television in Manchester. And then I moved to become head of news at a very interesting time in Northern Ireland in 1978 with Ulster Television. And then I helped set up the second channel of RTE, Radio Telefís Éireann, the Irish state broadcaster. And then I became a freelancer and got involved in drama. And I did a big production in Europe, which took me 2 years to make. And when I returned to the UK after that, Channel 4 had just been set up. And the duopoly that existed in British television between ITV and BBC ended. And the Channel 4 remit was to give an opportunity to independent producers to make programming for them. And it meant really that those of us who were freelancers who had gone out on our own, thought this was a great opportunity. But almost none of us, in fact I'd say none of us, knew a thing about running a business, knew nothing about creating an infrastructure for a business. We just rubbed our hands in glee and thought all these hours of television that Channel 4 are bound to buy from us. And we all scrabbled for commissions, and none of us really thought about what money we needed to run a business. None of us thought about our office overheads. None of us imagined we might need any full-time staff. None of us actually had ever put a budget together for a programme because, frankly, in the 70s and 80s, you went into your boss's office and said, oh, I'd love to make a film about this or that. And there would be a guy in there who on the back of a fag packet, and literally on the back of the fag packet from time to time, would kind of put down some numbers, and he'd look at it without telling you what the number was and said, oh, that'd be fine, yeah, right, okay. And it was based on, well, you'll need a crew for 5 days, you'll need editing for 7 days, there's a bit of processing costs, and that's it. So none of us understood that. And in the early days, the way it worked at Channel 4 was that you got your production fee based on a percentage of the overall budget. So usually it was about 7.5% of the overall budget. And that looked very good on paper, often, but you didn't take into consideration the money you needed to put aside for your overhead, or indeed the money you needed to invest in development. Because one of the things I tell everyone, whatever line of work they're in, is always be prepared. If you have any success, as soon as that success is recognised, have the next thing ready. So for instance, if one of my programmes went out and the following day it got decent reviews, I was into people's offices immediately with the next project. Because if you left it a week, other things had come along, other things had caught their attention. So I learned very early on to have a plan, to plan ahead on the basis that this may work, so what's the next incremental step? And I have to say, in the first 2 years, I hardly made any money. I think I remortgaged my house, and eventually learnt a great deal. And I was saying earlier that I'm not sure what was the best, whether it would have been better to invest in an MBA or to learn it on the run. I learnt it on the run and survived, despite how precarious it was. So I now pat myself on the shoulder and say, oh, no one needs an MBA, you can learn. I'm not sure about that, but I did learn. And you learn other things very quickly. We all thought it was wonderful just to get a commission. We learned within the first 3 or 4 years that in fact that really didn't benefit us. What we needed to do was to hold on to the rights of our programming. So we could license a program and maybe take less money up front because, as I've said many, many times to many, many people, content is king. You will always go on selling things. And it gives me a kick, gave me a kick last year, that the very first film I ever made, which was about Northern Soul in 1974, called Wigan Casino, was re-released on DVD. Back then I knew nothing about rights, and so I love seeing it in DVD stores, but I don't get a penny for it. And in fact, I've not had a penny for anything I made from the beginning of my career until the 1990s. So think about stuff like that. It's very attractive to get a job, but we all have intellectual property rights to think about. It's certainly the kind of things I suspect many of you do. Anyway, I will shut up now. I was trying to justify why I was asked to chair this. I'm not sure I have. And I'd like to just kick off by turning, well, she's moved, to Nona and hand you over to Nona Hunter from Arts Council England.